Okay, so it's time for us to continue our coverage over Batman Knightsend. And we do pick up with part three and part four of this storyline. And with that being said, we're still seeing Bruce Wayne trying his best to get back into that position where he should be able to take down John Paul Valley and be able to take up the mantle of Batman once again. But before we do dive into today's storyline properly, I kind of want to sit down and briefly explain what Knightsend is all about, just in case we do have some new people following along with us when it comes to our coverage over Knightsend. You see, Knightsend was the final part of the trilogy for Nightfall. As we all know, Nightfall was the first part of the trilogy, where you have Bane going out of his way to break the back of the Bat. It was a huge moment in Batman comics, a classic moment, but that was Nightfall. And so after that, you didn't have DC give us Night Quest. Now, Night Quest was honestly not that great, but it was still a cool idea to see John Paul Valley be Batman for a period of time. Now, when it came to Night Quest, it was also broken up into two separate storylines. You had Night Quest the Crusade and Night Quest the Search. Now, the Crusade was really more the idea of us following John Paul Valley adventures of being Batman, while the search was more of Bruce Wayne going out of his way to find Jack Drake, but to also find Sandra Kinsolving, but to also find a way to cure his back. Really, that last one was done on accident, but a good thing it did happen because it began the process of bringing Bruce Wayne back into the mantle of Batman. And all that led into Knightsend. And Knightsend is really more right now in the early parts of our coverage over this part of Nightfall. Is really more of Batman trying to regain the mantle of Batman because for that period of time where he was not Batman, his body forgot how to move like he did when he was Batman. He's trying to get back to that point where he was a great fighter and being able to go toe to toe with almost any opponent who tries to fight against him. And so right now, John Paul Valley is still Batman, but it's Bruce Wayne saying, over time, sooner or later, I should be able to get the mantle back from you. And really, he needs to because by this point in our coverage over Nightfall, it's really more of John Paul Valley now being that aggressive Batman now. He's out there killing people, hurting people. And so right now, it's Bruce saying, I need to hurry up and retrain my body so that I will then be able to go after John Paul Valley and hopefully stop him. And so that kind of led into him calling up Lady Shiva as a way to help train him to get back into that shape that he wants to be in. But now we are able to dive into the opening pages of part three of Knightsend. And we do pick up with Detective Comics issue number 676. Now, we pick up with Dick Grayson and Tim Drake, Nightwing and Robin, because in our last video, we had saw Bruce Wayne told them, like, your goal right now, while I am gone trying to get my body back into shape, is to watch over John Paul Valley, to kind of observe him and to see how far he is possibly slipping in his mind. And so you have the two characters being able to break into the Bat Cave. Now, this is really important because in the early parts of Night's Quest, really at the end of Nightfall and beginning of Night Quest, when you had John Paul become Batman, he began to kind of block off the different paths of the Batcave as a way to keep Tim Drake out, really anybody out. But luckily for Tim Drake, he found another way into the Batcave. And so their main goal is to set up cameras as a way to watch John Paul Valley to get more information about him. Now, they do believe that he is gone, but then out of nowhere, they see somebody coming out of the shadows, and they believe it is John Paul Valley returning to the Bat Cave. But it's not John Paul Valley. You see, John Paul Valley is not at the Batcave. He's out there going after different gunners. Now, gunners are a new type of gang in Gotham City who might be working for a character known as Carlton Leha. Now, Leha was the person who had killed off John Paul Valley's father. And so right now, it's John Paul trying his best to find Lee Ha, because in our last video, he had found a medallion that had belonged to Lee Ha, and that tells John Paul Valley that sooner or later Carlton might try to come after John Paul Valley to bring him down, just like he did when he came to John Paul's father. And so we see John Paul just being this brutal Batman once again, going after different members of the Gunners to hopefully find somebody who might have information on where in the world Lee Ha could possibly be at. Except while you have John Paul Valley trying to interrogate one of the members of this certain group of people, he's then confronted by Saint Dumas. Really, he's being confronted by the system that was implanted in his mind. And I know you guys are most likely tired of me like re-explaining the whole idea of the Order of Saint Dumas in the system, but just in case we do have some new people following along with us, I want to make sure they fully understand what in the world is going on when it comes to John Paul Valley. You see, we had learned that for John Paul Valley, his father belonged to the Order of St. Dumas. Now, the Order of St. Dumas was a group of people who broke away from the Knights of Templar back in the 14th and 15th century, one of those centuries. Either way, when they broke away, they began to follow a guy known as St. Dumas, and they were able to build an order after him. Now, fast forward, when it came to John Paul Valley's father, he was part of the Order of St. Dumas as Azrael. You see, Azrael is a title given to you by the Order of St. Dumas. You are their avenging angel. Anytime somebody crosses a line with the order, they sent out their avenging angel, Azrael. And when it came to Carlton Lee Ha, he was their latest target, and they had sent out John Paul Valley's father. Unfortunately, he got shot and had to go back home before he died to tell his son that he's next in line to become Azrael. And that was when we learned that for John Paul Valley's father, he had placed in John Paul Valley the system. Now, the system was supposed to be used as a way to teach John Paul everything about the order, but also like his role as Azrael, but also some like fighting moves, make sure that he'll be somewhat ready to become the next Azrael for the Order of St. Dumas. Now, at the very last second, you have Bruce Wayne kind of swoop in and say, hey, don't become Azrael. Join the Bat family. And like maybe sooner or later, you'll become the next Batman, which he did in Night's Fall and Night Quest. But either way, when it comes to John Paul Valley, because he has a system in his mind, he is constantly being confronted by, well, Saint Dumas. And so right now, the spirit of Saint Dumas from the system is constantly calling John Paul Valley a failure. Like, you failed as Azrael, and because you have failed as Azrael, you ran over and became the next Batman, the protector of Gotham City, but you're also failing in that as well. And so for John Paul Valley, he's been trying to ignore St. Dumas, who just keeps reappearing and calling him a failure, but unfortunately, he can't. It's like constantly playing over and over in his head. But now we can go ahead and like jump back over to Dick Grayson and also Tim Drake. Now, when we do, it's really more of the two characters now being confronted by Harold. Now, when it comes to Harold, he was this hunchback who was also mute, but he was an engineer who worked for Bruce Wayne and Tim Drake in the Batcave. Now, for Harold, Homeboy disappeared in the early parts of Nightfall. No one knew where in the world the guy went to. Well, kind of find out, the dude found a hidden part in the Batcave. It has been there the entire time. So it's like, okay, you know what? I kind of got this feeling that Bruce Wayne is coming back very soon as Batman. So let me go ahead and just pop back out once again. Now, when it comes to Harold, he does show both Dick and Tim what John Paul has been using as a way to get around Gotham at a very fast pace. And of course, we get reminded that for John Paul Valley, he has this Batmobile that has the ability to ride the subway tracks to get around very quickly in Gotham. Now, for Dick Grayson, he's kind of worried because this place was his home for many years. But right now, it does not seem like his home. And so he's kind of hoping that maybe Bruce Wayne can get the mantle back and turn his place back into his home once again. Now we're able to jump over to Bruce Wayne, and when we do, it's really more of Bruce Wayne kind of wondering if he is ready to jump back into the abyss. Now, the abyss is really more of him becoming Batman once again, kind of taking up that dark mantle of a hero. And so every single night, ever since the beginning of Night's End, you have Bruce Wayne just standing over Gotham City and wondering if he's ready to jump into the abyss like he did the first night he became Batman. And to him, he's not ready at all yet. And so, unfortunately, he must continue to train. With all that going on, we can then jump over to John Paul Valley. Now, for John Paul, the dude's still trying to hunt down Lee Haw. So he was able to grab one of the guys earlier to kind of interrogate him to hopefully figure out where he is at, Lee Haw is at. Now, this guy, he said, listen, I had no idea what his name was, but this guy did sell the guns to me. Now, there was a middleman that was able to set up the meeting, and that would be Candy. If you find Candy, then most likely you should find Lee Haw. And so just like that, you had John Paul leave to hopefully find this Candy person. Now, I kind of want to jump back over to Bruce Wayne to explain more about his training with Lady Shiva, because earlier all I said was he's being trained by her, and that's really it. So for Bruce Wayne, his whole idea of training is going up against different people who want to kill him. Let me explain. You see, for Lady Shiva, when she was confronted by Bruce Wayne, when he asked her to train him, she thought it was an insult because she only trains people who can become a worthy opponent for her to fight against and most likely kill. And so when she saw Bruce Wayne learn that Bruce is no longer the Batman, he was no longer a worthy opponent. Now, for Bruce Wayne, he tells her, if you go out of your way to train me, then sooner or later I'll become that worthy opponent for you again. And so she's kind of like, okay, let's train. Now, here comes the big problem. She wanted Bruce to become a killer because sooner or later, you're going to have to cross that line to kill somebody if you want to survive. But for Bruce, it's a huge no-no. Like, hey, I ain't killing nobody. Now, what she did was she killed off somebody known as the Armless Master. Now, the Armless Master, he has 7 pupils who had became their own masters themselves. The problem is that when they had heard that their master was killed off, they're kind of like, okay, you know what? We have to get revenge against the person who killed off our old master. Now, for Lady Shiva, she wore the mask of Tengu, but she had given Bruce that mask. And so right now, those 7 new masters, they believe that Bruce Wayne was the one who had killed off their master. But in reality, he didn't do anything. Now, for Bruce, he's very upset about the idea of what's happening to him, but at the same time, he realized that this is a perfect kind of training. And the reason why I'm bringing that up right now because for Bruce Wayne, he's being confronted by some ninjas who work for one of the 7 masters who are trying to come after him. And so once you have Bruce being able to fight against those guys, he's then confronted by his next opponent, one of the 7 masters. Now, this battle is very short-lived because once you have Bruce Wayne being able to take down this guy, but just barely once again, he's then confronted by the next of the 7 masters just like that. But once again, this battle is also short-lived. And the reason why, because when it comes to this master, she has this chain that she's trying to use as a way to attack Bruce Wayne. The problem is that when she does jump into the air with her chain unfortunately wraps around a rear view mirror of a truck and pulls her away to instantly knock her out. So for Bruce Wayne, he got very lucky because she could have easily defeated him. But while all of that was going on, for John Paul Valley, he was trying his best to hunt down Lee Haw. And so when it came to that Candy person, he told John Paul there's somebody who might be able to help you find Lee Haw. And so you had Candy and John Paul go over to a pit house. Unfortunately, when they find that guy, he's been killed off. Somebody had used a piano wire as a way to kill him off. Now, for John Paul, he truly believes that it was, of course, Leha. Leha came back from the dead and right now trying to come after him. And so for John Paul, he's hoping that sooner or later he should be able to find Leha and finally get rid of him. But once you have John Paul get back over to the Batcave, he's once again confronted by Saint Dumas. Now, Saint Dumas is trying to tell John Paul that he's completely wrong when it comes to the medallion. You see, for Saint Dumas, he's telling John Paul, what you found earlier does not belong to Leha. Leha had so many followers out there that most likely the medallion that you have found earlier belonged to one of his followers. Now, for John Paul, he's not trying to listen, but at the same time, he hates the idea of St. Dumas still kind of calling him a failure. And so right now is John Paul saying, I'm going to show you, I'm going to show everybody that I am not a failure, that I am somebody special. And so it's him screaming out loud in the Batcave. But let's not forget that Dick Grayson and Tim Drake, they had set up cameras in the Batcave to watch John Paul Valley. And so what they're seeing is seeing a man just going crazy. And they're kind of wondering, who in the world is he talking to? And so as we dive into the next chapter for Knightsend, we jump over to Legends of the Dark Knight, issue number 62. Now, with this issue alone, it's really more just kind of reminding us what we had literally just saw at the ending of the last issue. The whole idea of John Paul Valley being told by St. Dumas that he is completely wrong about Leha being behind everything going on in Gotham City. That basically he is a failure. And so you have John Paul once again saying like, I'm going to prove I'm a great warrior of St. Dumas. I'm going to prove I'm a great protector of Gotham City. But while saying all those things, he's once again being observed by Robin and also Dick Grayson. And really, it's more Dick Grayson realizing that Bruce Wayne got a lot of work to do when it comes to bringing down John Paul Valley. And speaking of Bruce Wayne, he's still going on with his crazy training fighting against the seven masters who are coming after him. And so now it's time for Bruce Wayne to be confronted by the next one. And so, of course, like we saw in the last chapter, you have Bruce Wayne be confronted by all these different ninjas who work for the next master that Bruce is going to fight against. And so once you have Bruce being able to take down all these different ninjas very easily, he's then confronted by their master. Now, their master is already kind of reminding Bruce Wayne of Bane because, again, Bane was the one who had technically ended the career of Batman temporarily at the end of Nightfall. And so seeing somebody who kind of resembles Bane in different ways is Bruce kind of wondering in the possibility if this man will end his career like Bane did in Nightfall. Let's check in on John Paul Valley. And the reason why, because you have John Paul go over to Candy once again. And apparently Candy thought he had a good place to hide from John Paul, but unfortunately John Paul knew where to go to find Candy after beating down some thugs who knew about Candy's hideout. Either way, you have Candy tell John Paul where he can find this gun runner who's most likely Leha just hiding out in Gotham City. And so for John Paul, he goes over to the docks. And of course, he does find some thugs there working for the gun runner, the man in charge of the entire operation. And so once you have John Paul Valley being able to take down a few thugs, he is then confronted by a helicopter that's trying to, well, shoot him down. And so while you have John Paul dealing with that, the story goes back over to Bruce Wayne. You're going to see the story for this chapter alone kind of go back and forth between John Paul and Batman. And really, when it comes to most of the issues of this storyline, it does that a lot where we jump back and forth between Batman and John Paul to kind of do some small comparison between the two characters. But either way, for Bruce Wayne, he is really struggling when it comes to fighting against his latest opponent. This opponent is really giving him a hard time when it comes to being able to win the battle. And like I said earlier, for Batman, this guy kind of resembles Bane in different types of ways. And so it does seem like most likely Bruce might lose this battle. And really, while you have Bruce going through his struggles in his battle, Jean Paul is about to get his struggles in his battle by going up against someone who's wearing a powered armor suit. And no, this is not Carlton Leha at all. It's just somebody else wearing a power suit getting ready to fight against Jean Paul Valley. And this leads into really both characters kind of getting to that point where it does seem like they have no choice but to go ahead and kill off their opponent. Now, for Bruce Wayne, I'm going to save him and his battle for the very end of this video, but I kind of want to focus more on Jean Paul Valley because you have Jean Paul Valley fight against this guy in his power armor suit. They go back and forth for a good while, but you didn't have Jean Paul being able to win his battle. Now, the guy does fall on top of a bunch of grenades, and you have Jean Paul just say, hey, you know what? Let me go ahead and blow up all those grenades that can most likely kill you all. So there he goes. And so with him killing off his opponent, we can jump over to Bruce Wayne. And really for Bruce Wayne, he kind of realized that to get out of this training that Lady Shiva had technically set up for him is to be a killer. That's the whole idea of Shiva's training, because she realized that sooner or later Bruce is gonna fall. And the reason why, because he is not able to kill anybody. And so this is her going out of her way, sending off these different people to hopefully teach Bruce to kill somebody. And so for Bruce, he says, okay, you know what? There's only one way out of this. I have to become a killer. And so he does the same move that Shiva had taught him at the very beginning of the storyline. So it does seem like Bruce had just killed somebody. But once Bruce had supposedly killed off that person, he's then confronted by Tim Drake and Dick Grayson. And so in their eyes, it does look like Bruce had just killed somebody. And this is where we're going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see you on the next comic book video. Later, y'all.